Hi YouTube, Art here again with another controller review, and today we are talking about the GameSir Tarantula. GameSir was kind enough to send out their new symmetrical stick layout, and we're going to go over all of it today. I think the best way to start is get out of the way the weird stuff. The face buttons are membrane buttons, so they're not clicky mechanical buttons whatsoever, and they feel pretty bad. But they proudly advertise that it has 9 remappable buttons. The only problem, only 2 of them are in useful places, the buttons on the back. The other ones are these front face buttons here, which are clicky, and then this top GameSir bar, kind of like the touchpad, you can click in the top here, and the middle presses in. So I guess it would work if you play with 2 fingers on the shoulder buttons and on the triggers. You could reach in and maybe press those, but I would have really liked to see more buttons on the back. I personally use 4 buttons. I slide, jump, weapon swap, and plate, and then reload all on the back, so I don't have to take my finger off the sticks ever, and I don't play claw. If you do play claw, this controller is probably perfect for you. The 2 buttons on the back are in a great place. They're big, so you can kind of move your hands around. And the only bad thing, like I said, are the face buttons are membrane switches. While it is a PlayStation layout, it is only compatible on iOS, Nintendo Switch, and PC. So you can't use this on PlayStation, you can't use this on Xbox. The other weird thing about this controller is the USB-C port is very recessed, and it's a specific shape, so you can only fit their cable inside of it. They do offer a braided cable on their website, but it would have been nice just to see them flush mount it so that you can use any cable you want. Besides all of the remappable buttons being in really weird places, the buttons on the back really don't feel that great. They do have a lockout system on the back, but they feel clicky, not quite like a membrane, but they're not that crisp mechanical click that you feel on a bunch of other controllers. And the buttons being so big makes it kind of awkward. I mean, they just don't feel great. They don't feel bad, but they don't feel great. There is another weird thing that we'll talk about once we get into some of the stick tech, but let's go ahead and start talking about the good stuff. So this features TMR sticks, which are also magnetic based, meaning they will resist drift much better than the traditional carbon rubbing style. These are a different tech than Hall effect, and they are more sensitive and require less power. That means if you play this wirelessly, you will get better battery life. Now, I didn't test it, but the wireless dongle is locked to 250 hertz. You can see that all over the internet and at different reviews. I personally would never use a Pro controller wireless because the best delay and the most consistent delay you're gonna get through wired. We'll go over the desktop app that just released for this, but they also do offer a phone app that gives you the same controls. So if you wanted to not have to tab out of the game or control it from your phone, you can connect via Bluetooth, change all the settings, and they will save to the controller. So we'll just jump right into the GameSir desktop app. This is called GameSir Connect. And as you can see, they have different panels. I scaled it bigger here so you can see the top left is lights. You can set different presets for the lighted bar at the top, which I don't really care about. But another cool thing is if you click through, you have options for the light strip, but you can also change the button lights. You can change between Xbox layout and Switch layout, which is kind of cool. If you switch it, it mechanically changes, and you can kind of hear that in my mic as it switches layouts. Again, I don't really care for this. I would have liked to see buttons on the back in better places, but it is pretty cool. The menus are kind of weird. You also have to press B on the controller to exit, but on the home page, you now see there's a trigger section where you can decrease the dead zones. You can turn on fixed hair trigger mode. I don't really know what that does, but I do only play with it with digital triggers. It does have the switches on the back. I don't think I covered that. So you can switch between full pull Hall effect triggers, and you can switch it onto the digital tap triggers. I play FPS, so I only leave it on the digital tap triggers. You can also click into the trigger section and adjust the curves, change the dead zone, change where it hits for each trigger, which is a really nice level of control. Now, the part that I'm sure most people are curious about are the sticks. Now, there's 2 different modes you can run the sticks in that we'll get into here in a second, but you have dead zone and anti-dead zone settings, which I just leave alone. I make sure the dead zone is set to 0 here because personally, I like to play on a 0 dead zone. And then they show the curves here, which you can adjust if you click through to the advanced section. So you have dead zone here, you have curve adjustment, and then just like the Vader that I reviewed previously, you can set the circularity of each stick to a different value. There is raw, which is square, and then there is circle. Now, from my testing and from other videos I've watched, circle does have a little bit of a hard-coded dead zone in it, but it's so small that you can't really feel it, and it is pretty nice. It does feel pretty good, but you can switch between left stick and right stick if you want. You can set the left stick to raw, which is square, kind of like I run the Vader, and then you can set the right stick to circular. which will be a perfect circle. Here in a moment, once we're done with the app, I'll show you the testing. Each stick also does have an advanced mapping section where you can change the sensitivity, you can invert stuff, and you can change each dead zone. This is a nice level of control, but again, I just kind of leave this alone. Now, the next most interesting part to me is the button section. This is where you can do remapping. It shows you where all the buttons are. You can remap everything, including the face buttons on the controller. And you can kind of see here, I have made the top bump on the left side of the GameSir bar Y to switch weapons. I really can't reach it. Again, these buttons are in a weird place. And then I made the right side of the bumper up on the D-pad so that if I'm ADS'd, I can ping. Again, super weird and not natural for how I hold my hands. And then by default, the C1 through C4 buttons, which are the extra select and start buttons on the front of the controller, those are all duplicates of the share and the pause button. So those will all function like that. I have tried remapping one of them to R on the keyboard, which is super cool. You can do keyboard mappings. But again, I really am not a fan of where they put these. So I wish they could have put some buttons on the back or somewhere else that were more ergonomic and more reachable. Then you can see that I have the back paddles L4 and R4 mapped to A, jump, and B, slide in Call of Duty on the back paddles. Personally, I never use the gyro for anything. I know some people complain about that, but you can find reviewers that cover it. The gyro seems good. It's 6-axis, they say, and there's a bunch of controls in here. But again, that's not something I really use, so I'm just gonna skip over that. Now we're gonna hop into Gamepad Tester just to show off how the dead zones kind of work and how the different circularities on the stick work. You can see my left stick. If I rotate it, we'll just go ahead and flick on test circularity here. It is not a perfect circle at all. It is that raw input and it is a square. And if I let go, you can see the number on the left kind of flickering between two numbers. That's how you can tell it is true zero dead zone. That is the raw input mode. Now, if you look at the right stick, it's not changing as much. It is changing a little bit, fluctuating just between a couple thousands of the decimal place, but it's not as chaotic as this left stick, which is very easily influenced. If I spin this one, you can see that this is a full perfect 0% circle, or pretty close. Now, they do hard code a dead zone. Typically, I'm not a fan of this in controllers. There's another controller I'm reviewing. You'll put up on the channel here in a little bit. I'll complain about it. But this level of dead zone is fine. I don't really find it weird or off-putting. It's nice for the perfect circularity. Outside of the awkwardness of only having two buttons on the back of this, when playing with this, it made my sense feel really weird. It felt like there was a curve built into the sticks, or maybe it was faster. I talked to a friend that's really nerdy into the stick tech, and he suggested that it could be because they use their own form of TMR sticks. They don't use the Gully Kit sticks, and they're shorter and smaller. But I noticed something in this Stick Analyzer app, which is from John Punch, who runs the GamePadla website, which is a great website testing a bunch of different controllers. And while I don't agree with a lot of the testing methodology that he has entirely, this is a great tool to see some stuff. So we're just gonna test the right stick here, press 2 and then enter. And it's gonna ask us to rotate the right stick 3 times. We'll do that 1, 2, 3. And then it's gonna ask us to track this, which is really hard and it's gonna look messy, but I'm gonna try my best. Tracking the center dot, the center dot, the center dot, the center dot. I'm really bad at this. I have shaky hands. There, okay. So what I want you to look at here in these results is the little bit of stair stepping that happens here. We'll run this test one more time because there's like a smoothing that happens. If you remember earlier in the video, I have the right stick set to circular, so we're gonna start with that. You're gonna hit enter. It's gonna prompt this rotate 3 times clockwise, so we're gonna do that. And once that's done, it's gonna have us follow this guide. Now, I'm not gonna do it perfect to show you guys something, so I'm gonna get ahead of it, a little behind it, ahead of it, a little behind it, ahead of it, a little behind it, boom, right? Now, look at the stair stepping here on this graph. There's very hard changes and shifts, and another thing to note is the analog points here. Compare that to when I show the Vader here in a moment. Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing with the left stick. So I'm gonna press 1 and enter. We're gonna do the same calibration, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm gonna roughly trace this so I can show y'all what I'm talking about here. So a little bit behind it, ahead of it, a little bit on it, behind it, ahead of it, just so we get a wonky graph there. Now look at how much higher resolution this is. There's no smoothing, there's no ratcheting. It's just a line that looks like I drew it by hand. So all of the little inputs are going into it. Now, if you put these next to each other, it kind of feels like the circularity setting for circular on this is doing some extra smoothing. So I did play with a little bit in the raw mode. It did feel a little bit better, but to me, this kind of defeats the purpose of the controller. If you can't get a one-to-one input in the circular mode, it really doesn't seem worth it. So what I'll show y'all now is what circular looks like on the Vader 4 Pro. So I have the Vader 4 Pro hooked up right now. The right stick is set to circular, and we're gonna test that first. So I'm gonna press 2, enter, do the rotation, 1, 2, 3, and we'll do the same tracking here. So I'm gonna get a little bit behind it and then a little bit ahead of it. And this just gives you like a wonky line that you can kind of see how it shapes out, right? Now this looks a lot like the raw input on the Tarantula. There's a lot of high resolution little dips and dives in here. It looks like it was drawn by hand. Then if you look down here, compared to the other tests on this, there were only like 1,000 or 800 points. This shows 2,000, 1,700 points. So this, I think it means it's higher resolution. Maybe Johnny will comment on this and give me some insight into it. But what I can tell is that this graph looks a whole heck of a lot more high resolution and detailed than the circular graph that you're getting out of the Tarantula. This makes me wonder if there's some extra algorithm in the circular that they have on the Tarantula that makes it smoother and takes out some of your input. This might not bother you, but for me, it's kind of a deal breaker. Just to be thorough, I'm also going to test the left stick on the Vader 4 Pro. Now, this is set to rectangular, which is very much like the raw setting in the Tarantula app. We'll go ahead and do the 3 rotations, and as you can see, it's sitting outside of the circle there. And then we'll do the tracking. And again, I'm going to get a little ahead of it, a little behind it, just so that we have some dynamics in the line that we're going to see in the graph, and y'all can see what I'm talking about. As you can see, this is pretty identical to the circular test. There's all the little dips and dives. It looks hand-drawn, and this shows me that it is very high resolution. Now, there is a little bit of disparity in the program and analog points. This is closer to the Tarantula. Again, maybe Johnny will comment, or somebody smarter than me will comment below and let me know what this means. For me, the stick analyzer tool was just a great way to make sure I'm not crazy. Just real quick to show you again, the left stick, which was giving me those very high resolution hand-drawn charts in the stick analyzer, is set to raw here. And as you can see, the dead zone kind of teeters around 0 and flicks around. This is how I would run it because it was going to feel better in game. Now, the bummer is you don't get the perfect circularity that you do on the right stick, but I would still run this as raw as well because that smoothing that we saw in the stick analyzer is just a no-go for me. I don't want the software or the controller making any changes to my aim. The whole point of these high precision magnetic controllers, in my opinion, is that 1, they don't drift, and 2, they are just super, super high resolution. And as a former mouse and key player, I want that one-to-one mouse feel. This gives me that and minimizes any weird curve changes or smoothing that happens. So I would recommend, if you do purchase this controller, to run both sticks in the raw mode until they make a response or make some changes that fix that smoothing that happens. I'm going to show a quick little input delay test. This is just a synthetic test, meaning it is only polling rate related, so it doesn't have anything to do with stick latency, button latency. In my opinion, the jury's still out on that because there's so much latency between you and the PC and the game that the stick button latency to me is really a non sequitur unless it's really, really bad. But people want to see this synthetic testing, so we'll launch a 4,000 samples here and I'll rotate this around in a circle. I'll make it big in the screen, and it does deliver an over 1,000 hertz polling rate, just like the Vader 4 Pro. Just like when I tested the Vader 4 Pro, there are no outliers. Outliers being really, really way out of whack polling rate changes. So this is a very, very fast and consistent controller. Like I mentioned, other people have tested the wireless dongle and it's locked to 250 hertz. And for me, that's just a deal breaker. All my controllers I run wired. Outside of being a PlayStation style layout, I think this is going to be really popular with people because based on a poll I did on Twitter, it seems like a lot of people are playing claw and only use 2 back buttons. I'm the bot that uses all 4. So this is going to be great for people, and the great part about it is the price. The Pro Edition, which comes with a charging stand and the dongle, which is 250 hertz, so I wouldn't recommend using it, that is $80, I believe, on Amazon. The controller itself, just the controller with the cable, is only $69.99 on Amazon, which is a crazy price for this. No drift sticks, some limits on the circularity you can do, but it is really just impressive. I am bummed that the face buttons are mostly membrane switches and it only has 2 buttons on the back, but outside of that, it's a pretty killer controller. I will have some more exciting news about symmetrical layout controllers here in the near future, but it's going to take some time to workshop this. This is a solution that's available now. I'll have a link down in the description below. A couple notes about the shape. It does kind of feel like a hybrid between the PS4 and the PS5. It's very comfortable in hand. I do wish it had some rubberized coating on the back, but I can live without that. Again, I've already complained about the custom button placements, and the sticks are exactly the same distance apart as they are in a PS5 controller. I checked. So to wrap it up, personally, I'm still going to use the Vader 4 Pro. I've gotten very used to the Xbox layout, and I just simply cannot function without 4 buttons on the back. Now, if you're one of the many people that answered my poll on Twitter and you play Claw, this might be a great controller for you. I think the only bummer is that the face buttons are membrane switches. I'm also really bummed that of the 9 customizable buttons, there's only 2 really usable ones, at least in my grip. But for $69, a PlayStation layout controller with driftless sticks and a high resolution sticks in the raw mode, not the circular mode, seems like a great deal. Now, I do have a couple more controllers in the pipeline to test, but with Black Ops 6 releasing, it's gonna be a little bit before I get to those. I wanted to get this out there because I think it is gonna be a really popular controller for a lot of people that don't need those 4 buttons. But to stay up to date on all my controller reviews and the upcoming Black Ops 6 audio, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. I'm gonna be live early on the 24th when the game drops in New Zealand to test audio. So that's twitch.tv/art_is_war. And until the next video, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.